All right, so we are now working on getting data into Excel from a database. Before we start working with Excel in this matter, we're going to choose this Google shortened URL and just see what it takes to interact with the database using a different front end. This front end is going to be a web front end. So you should be here. What does it say for you? I guess I should refresh this. Select star from Red Cat customer. So it turns out that there's some problem with pre-filling the password here, so you're going to have to change the password. So show options, come to here where it says password, and I'm going to give you the double secret password. The username is demo, the password is also demo. Probably not the most secure passwords in the history of passwords. But once you've done that, you should be able to hit submit, and that should show you the records. I'll hide the options again so you can see a little bit more of the data. And so, how many of you have some familiarity already with structured query language? Okay, it's maybe a little bit more than half. So, structured query language it's like a whole separate class just on structured query language. Maybe not a semester-long class. But this is kind of the basic select statement. So, select says, I want to get data out of the database. This next clause here says, which columns do I want to show? The star means everything. And then I got to tell it some table. So the owner of this table is called Red Cat, and the table name is called customer. So I'm saying select all columns from customer, and so there I have all the columns. And this interface truncates the records at 50, but there's more records here. Okay, so I could specify just the columns I'm interested in. I want the customer ID, first name, last name, address, and city. And so I could change that for the star. I have to separate these by commas instead of tabs, and that comes in. So I can specify just the columns that I want, and so that's how I say, well, there may be more columns here that I want, but I'm just going to say the ones that I want. So from customer, now here's how I specify which rows I want to see. And it turns out our textbook has a pretty good introduction to structured query language dealing with this chapter. It's there more for a reference. It's not something you're going to have to memorize for the exam or anything, but for dealing with data, you'll want some reference to be able to get there. So let's say I don't want to see all of the customers. I only want to see those where the state is equal to Utah. Here, Portsmouth, Enfield, Tringham, those are not Utah cities. But if I submit this now, that should restrict it down just to the cities I'm interested in, just to the customers I'm interested in. We'll recognize these as Utah cities. Brigham City, Bountiful, Springville, Orem, Roosevelt, Salt Lake, and so on. So in this case, we've got some back end sitting out there somewhere, and this front end then is connecting to it. Now let me come to show options again and show you. So this particular tool actually exposes the connection as well. And so the connection that we have here is, we're saying, it's a SQL Server database. The database on that server is called user data, and the host name of the server is websql.org. So that's, for a SQL Server, that's the base set of information that we need to be able to make that connection. So now our task is going to be, how can we do this same thing, this process here, but do it through Excel? It turns out there's some pretty sophisticated tools. We're going to open up Excel. We'll open up a brand new copy of Excel, brand new workbook. Nothing up my sleeve. No magic behind the curtain. There's a pretty sophisticated set of tools built right into Excel that allow us to have a read-only interaction with existing databases. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. Things didn't go so well with this in the last class. Like, we got almost there. We could see the data, but then when it actually imported, it ended up not quite finishing. We'll do a blank workbook. And let me just introduce you to these tools. It might work better for us today than it did in the last class. So on the Data tab, we should have this Get Data option over here on the left. And then there should be From Database. And from there, we should have from SQL Server database. Let's go ahead and get that going. If some of you are using an older copy of Excel, they're not quite showing the same way, let me know, and I can help you find this tool on your copy. Anyone else, older copy? Good. Okay, so here it's asking for the server that we're interested in. Looking at this connection string, what do you think the parameter for server is? Yeah, it's data.websql.org. Asking also for the database. What's the database? User data. So far, so good. We'll say OK. It's probably asking you for some kind of credentials. I guess mine got saved here. So you've got, I'm not even quite sure how to show these to you. If you look at the very left-hand column on that next dialog box that came up, there's something that says Windows and something that says, what does it say under Windows? Database? So yeah, select the one besides Windows. For the Windows, it's asking you for Windows credentials. And that would be, it's going to try to use your current login to be authenticated at the database. Believe me, the database we're trying to connect to has no idea who you are. And so we've got to go to the database credentials. And then it has username and password. Demo. So there you should be able to put in demo and demo. And you should be able to pull up. Then you should be able to get to this point. If it asks you any other thing, just accept the default. Anyone else getting to this location? Ooh, by the way, one quick warning. To do this, you're going to have to be on the BYU Secure Network. So if you are connected as a guest, this is not going to work. Anyone connected as a guest right now? Anyone else on Secure? Okay.
I do have a question, though.
Yeah.
When I enter the username and password, it says encryption support. The data you're trying to access doesn't support encryption. To access this data source using an encrypted connection, click OK.
Using an unencrypted connection?
No, using, an unencrypted connection.
So yeah, what it's saying is that your data is going to be passed into clear, and that's okay. Just say okay. Gives you something about the data not being encrypted, that's all right. This is not sensitive data. In fact, it's made up data. You'll have some thieves try to steal this because they're going to spam these folks. They're not even real addresses. Okay, so then are you getting to this list yet? Okay. So here's the first thing that's a little bit weird about this. You'll notice these first few tables, or these first few items here, have a different icon than the others. So the icon here is like two tables next to each other. This is what in SQL Server lingo is called a view. It's like a saved query. It's like someone's made a query and put it up there on the server, and you can consume data through that query. You might join several tables together and put some restrictions on the data. So we're going to go past those, and we're going to try to find the Red Cat employee data. We're going to use employee because it's a lot smaller. There's several thousand customers in this database. So we're going to find, not Red Cat D, but just Red Cat employee. There it is, Red Cat employee. Preview is evaluating. I don't want to wait too long for the preview. So I'm just going to go ahead and say load. Here's the part that didn't actually work for the last class. It worked for a couple of folks, but it didn't work for me. And so this should now be trying to bring that data in, and it will build a refreshable query. So if that data gets updated on the server, the next time we come here and tell this data to refresh, we don't have to go through that whole process again. We'll just remember that's the connection to the data that it wants, and it will refresh that data. And so now, luckily for me, it's brought that data in. So this should be exactly the same, folks, if I come over here and say select star from redcat.employee. E-M-E-L-O. We've got Lewis, Audrey, Kyle, and Zachary. Lewis, Audrey, Kyle, and Zachary. It's the same data. On my data tab, you'll notice we've got to refresh all. I'm not going to click it because it takes a while to refresh when we're all hitting it. But that would say send another request back to that server. Give me that data. And so Excel has some pretty decent tools for accessing data if I just want to read data. If I want to change the data, Microsoft says Excel is not your tool. It's some other tool to change data. Excel is not going to do it. Unless you know what? VBA. If you know VBA, you can change whatever data you want. So that's where we're headed here in this example today. So let's see what it takes to be able to kind of make the same kind of connection through VBA. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a code window. Alt F11 should do that for me. Hello, Alt F11. Let me come to my Developer tab, Visual Basic. All right, so here I'm in Book 1. I'm going to insert a new module. And I'll call this DB1, sub DB1. See what it takes to be able to access a remote database server from straight in VBA. All right. It turns out that the objects that it takes to make this connection are not readily available to us in Excel. We're going to have to connect onto additional objects. There are some objects that we could use, but to have the level of detail that we want, we're going to use a different set of objects. To do this, we are going to have to create a reference to those objects. So here's what we do. Maybe I'll go ahead and put a note here. Step 1, make a reference to the ADODB. That is done like this. Tools, references, Microsoft, Microsoft, ADODB, Microsoft Activex, data, something. Microsoft Activex Data Access Library or Objects Library. I'm not sure exactly if that's right or not, but we'll see it here in just a minute. So we're going to do tools, references. So what you have here are all the different kind of object libraries that you can add in. Some of these are just built in as a part of Windows, as the one we're going to be using now. Others are going to depend on what software you might have installed. So this Adobe stuff here, that's all here because I've got some Adobe stuff installed. You may not have those on your computer. Then come down here to find Microsoft, Activex, Data Objects, and there's lots of different ones, 2.0, 2.1, 2.5. Let's do 6.1, the most recent, highest number. It is not enough just to select it. You've got to check the box next to it. So check that box and then say OK. That is going to give us access to a set of objects that somebody wrote. Presumably somebody at Microsoft wrote them. And they're used for interacting with databases. So now I'm going to declare some objects. So dim, we're going to need a connection. Let's have some connection to work with the database. I'll call it CN as an ADODB.connection. You cannot say ADODB.connection until you've added this reference. I am also going to need a connection string. The DIMCS has a string. So the connection string has all the parameters needed to be able to connect up to that database. I'm also going to need some SQL. An SQL statement, so dim SQL as a string. Oh, one more thing here. I'm going to dim CN as not just a connection, this would give me an object variable that could bind on to this kind of object. Instead, I want to put a keyword here. What's the keyword? New. By putting the keyword new here, not only does it create the variable, it also creates one of these objects, and it binds the object variable onto the object. I'm going to need one more thing to be able to access these records, and that's a record set object. So we have rs as a new ADODB dot record set. Now I'm ready to start connecting. Let's establish our connection string first. CS equals, and I'd actually forgotten that that is right here inside this tool, so I also put it on Learning Suite. You can pick it off of Learning Suite, or you can pick it right off the connection of our whatever web interface this is. You put that in quotes, and there it is. It says, hey, we're going to use the SQL Server driver. That means that SQL Server driver has to be installed on this computer. Good news, folks, it comes with Windows. So if you're running Windows, you've got this driver. What if I was going to connect to Oracle, an Oracle database? Do you think the Oracle driver comes with Windows? It doesn't come with Windows. And so I would have to, step one would be to install the driver necessary to connect to that particular database. In this case, this one's already installed, which is why we use it. We don't have to worry about installing the driver. We're then telling you which database we're going to connect to and the server that database is on. So now we are ready to connect to, we're actually ready to open that connection. So cn.open. Cn is our connection object. It's the thing that knows how to get hooked up to a database. We're then going to give it, the connection string here is the first argument, so we'll give it our connection string, CS. It's now asking for our user ID. What's it going to be? Demo. And it's going to ask for our password. Demo. Now, I'm showing you kind of bad practice here, and that is to put the password into the code. What would be a better way to do this? Prompt the user to supply the credentials, and then just never actually write them in your code. Why is it bad to put them in your code? Anyone who has access to the code has access to the credentials. Turns out these credentials we like publish on the web, so that's okay. Okay, so that should get us connected to that database. Let's go ahead then and close the connection when we're done working with it, so cn.close. At this point, it should be very boring. Hopefully it's very boring. But if I run this and it runs without error, that's a great sign. It means it successfully connected to the database, didn't do a whole lot when it got there, closed the connection, and moved on. If you run this code and it produces an error, we've got to track that down. So the question is, in a corporate environment, would server just be the address to that server? Yeah, it might just be an IP address of the machine that's running the corporate database. So this is a host name. It just gets resolved to an IP address as well, right? So if I were to run my command prompt here, and hello command prompt, are you awake? Oh, yeah, I was awake. So if I was just to ping web SQL data.websql.org, then I'm not sure if it'll respond, but it should at least resolve the IP address. So that's the IP address of the machine we're communicating with. And this one's not configured to respond to a ping. See, trying to see here. Luckily in Windows that'll only run 4 times before it goes out. Okay, the database then, here's the idea. On this server is a corporate database server. I might have a database that marketing uses, I might have a database that accounting uses, I might have another database that Fred uses. And so the thing is, I can't have 2 tables with the same name unless they're in different databases. Or even then, instead, different schemas inside the same database. But the point is, I got to kind of keep things segmented so that folks don't step on each other's toes. And so that's what the database is. It says we've got different bins that we're using to keep track of the data, and that's what the database is. Okay, so now let's go ahead and bring some records back. So let's go ahead and set up our structured query language statement. So SQL is going to be equal to select star from redcat.customer. So in this case, redcat is actually a schema. You can think of that as the owner of the table, and CUSTONR. There's something like nearly 5,000 records here in this database, but we should be okay with that. Let me give x as an integer just so I can have a counter. Let me start x off at 1, x equals 1. And now I would just like to print off those records. So let's just start off by printing 1, debug.print. You want to print it to the immediate window, or do you want to write it out to a worksheet? You can write it out to the active worksheet. It's not that much harder. We've got sheet 1 here. I'm just going to make sure my active worksheet is blank. And we will just say cells, row number X, column number 1, dot value is going to be equal to, so far we haven't actually opened the record set. Slow down here. So we've established just a string, what the query is. Now the thing you kind of realize about this, is this select star from customer, is this executable code?
No.
It is. But who executes it?
Excel.
Excel doesn't execute it. As far as Excel is concerned, this is just a string. That's why it's inside quotes. It's a string literal. But ultimately, someone has to execute it. Who's it going to be? It's the database engine, SQL Server, right? Excel doesn't understand this structured query language statement. As far as it's concerned, the collection of characters, don't try to figure it out. We're going to send that off to the database to be evaluated. And that's the next part right here. So we've established that. We are now going to say rs.open. We're going to open our record set. First argument is the source. What's the structured query language we want to open? So our variable SQL. The second one is what connection do we want to use? We can have one connection open to SQL Server, another connection open to Oracle, another connection open up to Access, another one open up to a different database on SQL Server. We can have all these different connections at the same time. So we just got to know, out of all the connections you can have, which one do you want? Well, it's pretty boring here. We've got just one to choose from. What's it going to be? CN. So it has to be, it even says active connection. We've already opened up this connection. It's active. That's the one we're going to have to use. We're going to take all the rest of these and just use them as the defaults. Now that we've opened that, we've executed this query, and this object, the record set object, has received back the first record. So we should now be able to say that that cell, row number 1, column number 1's value could equal rs.fields. And we'll go by number. We can go by name as well, but let's go by number. Field number 0. And we don't want the name of that field, we want the value of that field. And why don't we just do 4 of these? So we're going to do field 1, so row number, column 2, 3, and 4. We're going to be fields 1, 2, and 3. But just to show you can go by the field name as well, I'll go ahead and drop that one in. Red Cat Customer 0, 1, 2, 3. That's the street address. I'll go ahead and bring that in as street address. It's just to show that you can go either by the name or by the number, just like we can do in most of our collections that have named objects. Now, this will be pretty boring because I'm only going to do one record, but let's make sure that this is working first, and then we'll see how to make it do multiple records. So I've got James, Dominic, and there's a street address. Okay, so here's the thing about the record set object. Record set object, it's a pretty sophisticated object. It knows how to interact with any database that you can connect onto. So once you have an open connection to the database, your record set can get records. It can actually be used to update values as well. But we are going to use it just to be able to bring data out of the database. But here's the thing. You get one record at a time. And think about it. These databases have sometimes millions or billions of records. What would happen if you wrote a query that said, oh yeah, I want all billion records? Do you think that object has enough memory to be able to hold all those records? Probably not. Your computer can't handle it. And so it's designed instead to say we're going to work with one record at a time. And so we've got to tell it to get the next record. Here's how we tell it to get the next record. So after we've printed off that first record, we're going to tell it, move next. Whoops. We've got to say the record set, rs, and it has a method called move next. That's going to move on to the next record. So what's coming next in this example? We are going to make a loop. Yeah. So let's just come here, do, and loop. And now this will work. But it's going to run until we have an error. Because we're going to tell it to keep moving next. What's going to cause the error? It's going to get to the end where there's no next. And so we'd like, rather than just running until it has an error, we'd like to tell it, well, why don't you do it until you get to the end of the file, until you get to the end of the table of data. And the truth is, we can put it at the top or the bottom. It belongs better at the top because just in case we've selected a query that has no record, is that a valid response to a query, the empty set? Yeah, that's valid. What's going to happen if we try to print a record where there's no records? That'll be an error. So we're going to check right up front to make sure we have it. So we'll say do until rs dot, and then it has a property called EOF, end of file. This will be false until we have read past the last record. Once we try to read past that last record, this becomes true, and that'll let us out of the loop. So now this should dump off several thousand. Oh, we're using x to tell what row we're running to. We better increment x. So x equals x plus 1. And because it's a loop, we're going to do a couple things. Do events. And save before we run. Well, I haven't even saved this yet. Go ahead and save this. Make sure it's an XLSM. I'm going to call it database winter of 18. And I may, just it'll take a minute to run, I may go ahead and run it so I can see it run into the back. So it's still running, because we're bringing back thousands of records. And there we're done. We'll go to the end. It's brought back 4,414 records. And so we have just hooked up directly to the corporate database and brought these records into Excel to be able to work. Again, not so exciting so far. Why not? Well, this tool is kind of built into Excel. We did it moments ago without needing any VBA code at all. Let's look at a couple of other things that will be helpful for us working. Any issues or questions on what we have so far? Let's go ahead and copy this. I think this example is pretty good the way it is. So we're going to copy it, and then we'll make one called DB2. So instead of DB1, we'll call this DB2. Now, instead of looping through all these records to get at them, it turns out that Excel has kind of a neat feature built into it, specifically for dealing with records from a record set. So I'm going to get rid of this whole loop. My record set is open. I don't need X anymore for this example. Didn't hurt to leave it there, but. So I'm opening the record set and closing the record set. Get myself onto a new sheet. Watch this. I'm just going to say active cell dot. There's actually a method called copy from record set. Range has a method that knows how to pull in the records off of a record set. And we said iterate across that record and deal with the columns. There's a method that knows how to do that. Now it's going to need to know some record set we're going to use. What's the record set? RS. You can put a maximum rows so you don't go crazy here, but we know that we're dealing with 4,000 rows here. But you're going to watch and just see how much dramatically faster this is than the last approach. It took several seconds for that last one to run. That one's done. And it's brought in the whole table. So if you're just trying to bring data in from a record set, that will do the trick. Okay, so this is all well and good, but the whole thing that we came into VBA for was so that we could write data to the database, not just read it from the database. So let's take DB2 again, copy it, and make it DB3. Okay, so we're still going to need a connection. To get data into here, I think we're not going to worry about trying to read the data in. We're going to use this just to push data into the database. So we won't need a record set. Record set is to bring the data back. We don't have to worry about the record set at all. Oh, I left something out, and those are the record set examples. Anytime we see an object that opens something, chances are, what else do we need? Yeah, close. So let's make sure we get that rs.close in those prior examples. Just before we close the connection, we'll close the record set. All right, so now we're on DB3. We're not going to be reading data out. We're going to be pushing data to the database. So in this case, I think I've created a table for us that we can insert data into. Hopefully this is going to work. So let's do select star from student. All right. So there's not a whole lot of records here. We've got an ID, first name, a last name, and an expected grade. So you should be able to plug this in for yourself. I'm going to come here. Here's how we insert data. The structured query language we use to insert data. Insert into the name of the table. We're then going to tell it the fields we want to plug in, and ID will get generated automatically. So we're going to put in first name, last name, and expected grade. So this is a separate list where we're just telling it the fields we're putting data into. Then we're going to say values. And again, a comma-separated list of values. These are all string variables or string data types, and so we're going to put single quotes. I'll put myself in here. Gov, Alan. Chances are I'm expecting an A minus, maybe a B plus. I don't want to get too ambitious. Now, in this interface, I can execute multiple statements just by separating with a semicolon. So it should execute this one first and then select back the results. It looks like someone else gave me a B plus. Jared, the one I saw, you got your hands up there. Got them in there in time before I pulled the records back. So, just in terms of structured query language, that's what it takes. I'll give myself an A minus or A plus. Now I'm really, you're putting my name in for this. You couldn't put your own name for that. I was going to say something about creativity, but that's like, you can put your own name. That's not even creative. A few other folks in here. Spencer, go home for an A. Dane, B plus, good enough for me. Just let me graduate. I'll be out of here. C minus. Okay. Good. So now we want to duplicate this same thing, but in VBA. So I'm going to copy the statement. The statement's looking beautiful. And I'm going to make that, I'm in DB3, I'm going to make that my structured query language statement.
Just to insert the values part?
Yeah, everything.
Oh, and the select.
No select, sorry. So just the insert statement. This is only going to be, in this other interface, part of what it does is it goes, oh, we've got these semicolon separated statements, and this interface chops those up into separate statements and sends them to the engine one at a time. So here, this connection object's not going to know how to do that. So we're going to give it a single statement to be able to execute. Now, this is a very happy coincidence that the text delimiter in structured query language is single quote, and the text delimiter in VBA is a double quote. That makes us not have to deal with double quoting these quotes in here. So that's good. Let me change this to C+, so I can see when that executes. So now I should be able to execute this statement, this code. If it runs without error, I should expect to be able to see that. So we'll do select star for student. I'll order it in opposite order of the ID, or by ID in descending order. And so, okay, so I made a loop. That was very funny. I can beat you though. Where, first, let's see, where grade, expected grade equals someone took it the data.
Let me put F at work.
Okay, you've had your fun for now. Actually, that may be true. I may not actually have a record in here.
Just put F.
After a lot of F's.
How do you delete the data?
Okay, so maybe no one did delete the data. Did I not get my C+ in there? Someone just deleted my data. Okay, folks, you had your fun. Let me get this in here. All right, I'm not going to let you see what I'm putting in.
Do you have to do rs.open with this statement as well?
But here, there's no record set involved. Oh wait, I never executed it. Okay, so I'm accusing you falsely. I made the SQL. Let's go back. I never executed it. I thought there was somebody here from my database class. I'm going to track down who it was by their IP address. I don't know how I would have done that since you have the same login. Anyway, all I've done is made a variable. See, I was trying to get a Z+, so you wouldn't know what to do. Here's how we execute it. So it turns out the connection object has an execute method. So we say, on this connection, we're going to execute this SQL. I'll run that. And I should be able to see my Z+ score.
So, what was that execute thing?
It's cn.execute, and then you tell it what statement you're trying to execute. Yeah, actually, I would think about it. I don't think you have permissions to delete. If you want to delete these records, you would say delete from student. And that would wipe out all the records in the table. The where clause, delete from student where first name equals gov. But I'm pretty sure I have not given you delete permissions on this table. You should be able to see the things that you've inserted here. So 221 records. Oh, A+, thank you. A+. George Washington gets a Z+. Okay, so for a hard-coded query, that's not too bad. But what if we have to do something where we're asking the user for the information? Let's go ahead and do it this way. This probably isn't the way that I would ask the user for this, but just for expediency's sake, let's do this. Let us dim data as a variant. We also dim user input as a string. And we'll start off by asking the user for some information. So user input equals, what's the method? What's the statement that gets data from the user? Input box. So input box, enter some data, title, SQL stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and give it an example to start with, a default. So it'll be two names, Kevin. I'm going to separate it with a pipe character, which is probably the shift backslash on your keyboard or somewhere over there, vertical bar. Worthen. And a grade, A+. In case he ever watches this, one who expected his ability to perform well in class. And then closing parenthesis. So I'm going to put up an input box that says enter some data, and it will start off with Kevin pipe, Worthen pipe, A+. We'll use that pipe to split this into an array. So that's what we'll use data for. Data equals split user input based on that pipe character. And so now I'll have an array with these values, and I should be able to just splice those values into the array. Or, better yet, I could parameterize this array. Watch this. I'm going to come here where I have my first name, and I'm going to make a parameter for this, just something that I could use to replace that. Maybe I'll use angle brackets and put in first name. I'll do the same thing for last name. Just going to replace just the last name with last name. And the same thing with expected grade. I'm just going to put it as grade. The angle brackets they bear no special meaning. This is just something that I can do a find and replace to be able to say I've got this structured query language statement started. I know I've got to actually put in the real first name, last name, and grade, but I want to get the statement set up the way that I can kind of look at it and go, okay, that looks pretty good. So I've got those tags built into it, and now I'm just going to replace it. SQL equals replace. Look at SQL, look for something, replace it with something. What am I going to look for? Well, that first name tag that I built there. So far, we're doing this is nothing about SQL. This is just about string manipulation. Saying look for the characters bracket, FIRST, and AME, and angle bracket, and replace that with data sub 0. Right? So data is going to be an array based on what the user put in, but split it up into an array wherever the piped character is. So first name, last name, and then expected grade. I'll do that same thing for all three of those parameters that I put into the string. Last name will be data number 1, and then grade will be data number 2. Now when I run it, it's going to prompt me to enter something in. I'll enter something in. It's got to have those 2 pipes in, otherwise things are going to go haywire. And then it should enter these things into the database. I'm going to come up here to my DB2, and I'll do select star from student, order by ID in descending order. Say cells.delete. That should clear all the cells off that worksheet, and then it should paste that data in. So if I run DB3, and at the bottom of it, I tell it I want to run DB2, and it should not only get the data, but it should also bring back the whole set of data and put it into my Word. So I'll run this. It's asking for some data. We'll put Kevin Worthen as the first one. And we should see it's putting Kevin Worthen and the rest of this information.
Could you go back to what you did on DB2?
Yeah. So on DB2, I made two changes. I changed this so that we're bringing the data back from my student table. Ordered my ID in descending order. That way I see my most recent changes at the top. I don't have to go searching for them. And then just before I put in the record set, I said cells.delete. Get rid of all the data that's there. Bring in some new data. Got it? Let me review then kind of the magic that happens here. This, what we're doing here to get the user input, you would never do this to your user. What would you do instead? You would make a user form, right? You have to enter some data, enter a user form, and if they try to do this without putting a first name or a last name, you're going to check and see, is there a first name and a last name there? And you'll say, hey, you can't do this unless there's a first name and a last name, whatever. But this is just kind of a quick way to be able to get the data in a format that's usable. We've built kind of a parameterized structured query language statement. We've got some tags in here that we are just going to use those to replace with the values that the user has supplied to us. Now let's do one more thing here and we'll see a problem. We just had St. Patrick's Day, so let's do something for Seamus O'Leary. How do you spell Seamus? Something strange. Like that? S-E-A-M-U-S? O'Leary. I'll execute that. I got an error. By the way, where is this error coming from? This error is coming back from SQL Server. It is not coming back from VBA or from Excel. So we sent a query over there and it came back and said incorrect syntax near Leary. What's going on? Let me, just before I try to execute that, let me do a debug.print with SQL. I'll run that again. We'll do Kevin O'Leary or Kevin O'Worthen. And Alt F11, Control G, Hello, Control G. All right, so this is the statement I tried to execute, right? Just before I said cn.execute SQL, I printed my SQL, so that's the thing I tried to execute. What's the problem? It gets here to these values, and it goes single quote. Great, we're starting some data. K-E-V-I-N, all part of the data. Single quote, end of the data. Beautiful, I got some data to put in here. Comma, I got the next field. Single quote, got some data. Oh, perfect. Oh, I got to the end of the data. And then it goes Worthen. It has no idea what Worthen is. It's thinking Worthen's got to be some kind of built-in function or something. It just doesn't know what to do with it. It's confused by that quote that we want to be inside the quote, but it thinks it's the end of the single quote string. So what do? So how do I tell it it's not really a quote? It's not the end of the quoted string. It's just a quote inside the quote.
Put another single quote.
Just like we do in VBA, I double it up. So we got to put quote, quote. Ugh. So what does that mean? Just train your users? Is that what this means? You want to put in Kevin O'Worthen, you got to put in Kevin O, quote, quote, Worthen? Is that the solution here? Well, that'll work. So here's now Kevin O'Worthen in there. But that's probably not what we want to do. What should we do instead? What's that? Yeah. Look, right after we split this, in fact, why don't we even do it as a loop? We have x as an integer. For x equals 0 to the upper boundary of data, data sub x is going to equal, replace, look at data sub x, look for something, replace it with something. Oh, the quotes get so bad here. Let me do it a different way. Let me ask for the ASCII character value of a single quote. That's number 39. So I can print number 39 by saying character number 39. There, that's another way of saying single quote, char 39. So I'm going to look for char 39, and I'm going to replace it with what? Char 39 and char 39. Two char 39 side by side. Otherwise, it would look like this. Replace, look at data sub x, look for single quote, replace it with two single quotes. VBA can handle that just fine. It's a little tough for you to look at what I typed and go, what is that now? What's that? 4 double quotes, a couple single quotes, I don't know what that is. So char 39 is just another way to get at that particular character. Look for a single quote, replace it with two single quotes. You should be able to now run this code, put in O Kevin, O Worthen, and that should come in just fine, O Kevin, O Worthen. It's a single quote. So it's actually looked at it, said, oh, you've got a single quote in there, I better make those into two single quotes, so that by the time I drop it into this quote, terminated string, it doesn't break the quotes. Okay, well, that's probably enough for one day. So we've seen how to get data out of a database using VBA, specifically the ADODB objects. We've seen how to put it in there. And this is really going to get you going well towards your next project. You've got a project to do tonight. Don't forget about that one. The next project coming up is the database manipulation project.
Will this code break if there's more than one single quote in the name? I don't know what it would be, but just if there were.
Let's take a look.
Will the place stop at the first?
So let me put in a couple of single quotes. We put in 4 single quotes. So I really want that to go in as KEV quote, 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 IN. So what's my replace going to do? It's going to look for every single one of those, and it's going to turn them into doubles. It's going to make 8 quotes in a row. Or the SQL Server is going to come along and go, oh, 2 quotes, that's a quote, 2 quotes, that's a quote, 2 quotes, that's a quote. This will go in just. So there it is, KEV, quote, 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 quote. All right, folks. Jerry Seinfeld gets an A+, Luke Skywalker an A-. That's the way it happens. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.